Welcome back, y'all. Now we have a very special guest joining us today. He's been covering South Florida sports and the Miami Heat for almost 2 decades in South Florida, and he is the creator and CEO of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, none other than Mr. Ethan Skolnick. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, good to be with you. You're actually making me feel younger than I actually am because it's actually been 25 years, if you can believe that. But
perfect. I think it sounds better when you say it near, like around 2 decades. It's a good word to throw around.
I would agree with that.
Awesome, man. Ethan, we know that you're going to be in the building tonight for the Heat's preseason game, and something that I wanted to ask you, and the reason why we brought you on here, the first question we have for you, mainly with the recent additions that the Heat have made to this roster, how have you seen Bam's progression as a Miami Heat player and even internationally as he won the Olympic gold medal this summer? How is he going to be able to translate all of that into Miami Heat success?
Well, I don't think it can hurt. Let's just start there. I mean, there's no way to guarantee it'll help, but it can't hurt. I mean, he was around great players. I think the biggest thing with Bam, we've discussed it a lot on 5 on the Floor, is that it's not about ability with him. It's about mindset. And, you know, he's a guy who has never been a go-to player on a team. If you go all the way back to AAU, Kentucky is playing with Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox. He was not the go-to guy there. With the Heat, you know, he was brought in as Whiteside's backup to begin with. And so he's not an alpha. It's just not his personality to be an alpha. And so it's going to take some adjustment. When you play around some of the best players in the world, the Jason Tatum, the Bradley Beals, well, Beal didn't make it all the way out there, but Devin Booker, et cetera,
right.
You know, and you get that belief because they believe in you. And I do think that is going to be a big difference for him. I think that he comes back more confident, I think, understanding where he is in the league. They did win the gold medal. It started slow, but, you know, they did finish it off. I think that will help. And I also think that there's a clear understanding now of what they need from him. He was not a max player last year. I mean, for everybody's like, well, that's our max player. He's not shooting enough. Mm-hmm. He wasn't making max money last year. Now he is this year.
Yes,
and so expectations change. Yeah, the expectations change. And also, you know, Kyle Lowry has been brought in for a whole bunch of reasons, you know, a lot of which we've seen play out here in the first couple of preseason games, and one of which is that, you know, he's Jimmy Butler's, you know, one of his best friends, but also he was brought in to bring it out of Bam. And everything he has talked about since and done since, if you watch on the court, when Kyle Lowry sends the ball into Bam Adebayo and Bam sends it back out, Kyle sends it back in. Okay, there's not going to be any of this, you know, I'm going to defer. I'm going to set up dribble handoffs for Duncan Robinson. I mean, will that be part of their offense? Yes. But Kyle is going to force him to be aggressive. And I think I think some of what you saw, the frustration, the wear on Jimmy last year was his feeling that he had to do everything because he was the only alpha on the team. Now that they have one in Kyle Lowry, Kyle and Jimmy together can work on Bam to bring it out of him. Because Bam's athletic upside is above either Kyle's or Jimmy's. It's just a question of him believing in it. So I think he's going to have a great season. I think they've simplified things for him this year. And at the same time, he'll be as dynamic defensively as he's ever been because the players around him, he doesn't have to cover up for as many guys as he did last season. So I'm expecting a big season from Bam.
Yeah, so are we. And something that you touched on was his Kentucky days where he wasn't the first or second option. And most of the nights he had to kind of take a step back. So I don't know if he ever got used to it, like you said. And for me, I'm just hoping that he becomes that dominant player on the floor. Maybe not necessarily verbally or with his actions, but just being able to be the guy night in and night out where we can depend on to say, this is the guy who's going to bang for us, get rebounds, and make some big buckets. Something else that I wanted to talk to you about, because I saw your tweet on Tyler Herro being the leading scorer for this year for the Heat, and it kind of like struck something in my mind to say, well, damn, if Bam's projection, right, and the ability that he has continues to grow, he should be one of those guys that competes for the leading scorer title, I guess, on the Heat. What have you seen from Tyler in these past couple of preseason games? Because he's been killing it. What have you seen privately and like on the court in the practices that can, you know, kind of lead credit to that?
Well, look, I'm a little out on a limb, okay, but I was a little out on a limb, and then Tyler had 3 games like that, so I feel a little more comfortable with it. I will say this: the Heat will be better off if either Bam or Tyler lead them in scoring, because that means that there is progression from the two of them. You don't want Jimmy or Kyle to lead you in scoring. They do so many other things, and obviously they're both up there in age compared to the other two, that you're better off as a franchise and for this season if Bam and Tyler are taking that additional aggressive step. For Tyler, leading them in scoring would mean being incredibly efficient, which he was not last year, particularly from three. It would mean him taking control of the bench unit and making it one of the better bench units in the league instead of something that we're going into the season thinking, I don't know if they have enough depth there. And from Bam's perspective, if he leads them in scoring, it means he's taken that mindset step, right, to be aggressive every night. Right. So I think best case scenario is it's one of the two. If it's Jimmy or Kyle, I don't think it's going to be Kyle. I don't think that's what Kyle has come here to do. I think he'll probably be fourth or fifth in scoring on the team, actually, but maybe even with Duncan ahead of him. I think they're going to have five guys, again, barring the Oladipo comeback, to a full scoring role. I think they're going to have five guys who average at least 13 points. I think they're going to have five probably between 13 and 19 or 13 and 20. I don't think they're going to have anybody at 21, 22, 23. Now, I do think the thing that could favor Bam or Jimmy from a scoring perspective is that both of them get to the line a lot. And so there'll be a lot of, if the Heat are as good as we think they can be, they'll be ahead in a lot of games. And Jimmy and Bam are both, Jimmy in particular, but Bam is competent, are good enough free throw shooters that they'll rack up, 4, 5, 6 points, down the stretch of games. And that could sort of push this over the top. But I do think with Tyler, there's a real opportunity here. He's talked a lot about the mid-range game, and I think, that gets him closer to being a three-level scorer.
I agree with you. And the reason why is because he has those abilities or those threats offensively, especially that's tailor made to today's NBA game, right? Where he's very shifty with his dribbling. He has a very quick release and he's able to attack towards the rim aggressively in order to pull up. And, and something that I thought about also with him is if he's able to score more, that probably takes a little bit pressure off of Duncan and allows him to become a little bit more freer in that second rotation where those guys are looking at each other like, all right, you take the role now I'll take the role, and they can go back and forth and kind of provide some type of heavy scoring for the Heat in that manner.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think one of the things that they'd like to see this year is that Tyler and Duncan improve defensively enough that the two of them can play together more consistently. And I think, my co-host Alex Toledo kind of nabbed this early last season, and it proved to be true. You can survive with two kind of mediocre to average defenders on the court. You can't survive with three. And too often last year, the Heat, Spoelstra had to make a choice. He was either going to go with a defensive lineup, which was going to give him no offense, like with Arize, Iguodala, etc.
Correct.
Or he was going to go with an offensive lineup with Dragic, Herro, Robinson, and Nunn, which was going to be a sieve defensively. I think that there's a little better balance on this roster. You can put out, again, this is even without Depot, you can put out a lineup, of Bam, Tucker, who's not a plus offensive player, okay, but Bam, Tucker, Jimmy, Lowry, and either Herro or Robinson, and you'll have 4+ defenders on the floor, and you probably will be able to score enough because Lowry, you'll at least be an average offense because Lowry will create easy opportunities, and if you get enough shooting from Herro or Robinson to space the floor, Bam expands his game a little bit. There should be enough offense there. Last year, that was not really an option. When you went with the defensive lineups, you didn't have enough offense, and so I feel like that is why they believe they're in better shape this year, because there's better balance on the roster in terms of you don't have a bunch of one-way players. Kyle Lowry is you've added another two-way player to the mix, offense and defense. That makes a huge difference. They're never going to be in a situation where they have three bad defenders on the floor at the same time. And that was the case a lot last season.
And it was critical to their playoff success or lack thereof of success in the playoffs because we saw what not having that point guard or at least a point guard who can defend and make a couple of buckets, what it did to us. And the addition of Kyle Lowry is definitely going to add to that factor because he is a guy who can hit some big shots. Like you said, we don't need him to be a 20-point game type of guy, but he'll go in there and give you your 12, 15 a night because he's going to hit some big threes. He'll get to the free throw line and he'll hit a couple of layups here and there. Now, in terms of Kyle Lowry and the rest of the additions that we made, obviously with PJ Tucker, we also got one of those crazy Morris brothers in the building, which I think doesn't hurt at all when it comes to defense. What do you think the key is to them having a big impact on this Heat season? Because we know that we've seen this team be really good at times, right? They made it to the finals in the bubble. We had up and down last year, but at the times where we needed to be our best, we could, and we could beat other teams, especially the Bucks and the Nets. And now that we have to compete with those two teams specifically for the top spot in the East, I'm kind of wondering, what do you think will be the biggest or is the biggest addition from those guys that we added this year?
Well, I think PJ kind of jumps off because I think he's going to give them, as long as they use him correctly and don't overuse him, I think he's going to give them a lot of what they missed when Jay Crowder left. If you're going to play small, in other words, you're going to play Bam at the 5, which still seems to be the direction that Spoelstra wants to go, right. Then you essentially have to have a 4 who can at least box out his man. Okay, I mean that's a little thing, but it's important, and I think we've seen it that when I watched it in the scrimmage and in the first preseason game where Tucker just takes up space, and so the ability to take up space and box out your guy will allow Bam to be a better rebounder. It will help the defense. They didn't really have that last year. They didn't have that additional screener. They didn't have that additional, assist, team rebounder. They just didn't have it. Now, he's not going to have a bunch of double-digit point games. He's not going to have a lot of double-digit rebound games. But I do think that what he adds, again, provided that they're able to kind of, nurse it a little bit to get him to the postseason, I think is going to be critical. I don't know about Markieff Morris yet. I have to see a little bit more. He had a bad year last year. I don't know if it was situational and kind of the role that he really couldn't get comfortable, or if there's a decline that's come. He is, unlike PJ, he's a little bit more reliant on not athleticism, but he was a scorer early in his career. There's certain things that made him valuable early in his career that I don't know if he can still do. Whereas PJ, what he's being asked to do now, I think he can do at his age. I don't think anything has changed significantly in that regard. So I don't think there's going to be any issue there. Basically, I think that I think he's going to be fine. And then there are other additions. Omer, we'll see how much he plays. I don't think it's going to be a lot early. I think this is a little bit of a developmental project. Strus and Vincent are really the guys they're counting on. At least until Depot is back. Vincent's going to get a look, and he looks much more comfortable to me as a point guard. I think the thing with Gabe is, can he do the one thing that they thought he could do, which was shoot? If he can shoot at about a 35% clip from 3, then he can be a very effective player for them in limited minutes, because he does defend. He has some instincts as far as shooting and scoring, right. and setting up an offense. I just think that he just got to shoot the ball well. But I like their mix. I have some questions about the depth. I still do, even after we've seen it look pretty good. I think Dedmon will be fine in his role. Duncan to me was the guy they had to re-sign. And then Oladipo becomes the wild card. If he can get back to 70 to 75% of what he was, then he elevates a team that I think is going to be good to a team that potentially could be great. But it's just, there's no way to count on it right now. To me, beyond him getting healthy, he doesn't look in shape. He looks to me, just standing next to him. I covered him a little bit his first 2 seasons in Orlando because I was a national writer at the time, and I spent some time up there. He looks a lot thicker to me, and not necessarily the right way. So I don't, they're going to have to, once he's healthy enough to do their full conditioning program, I think that's going to be a major project for them.
Yeah, I think so too. And I kind of get the sense of where you're heading with the Oladipo thing, right? We don't want a Dion Waiters 2.0 type of situation happening, right? We want this guy to be back and in shape and ready to play. And one of the guys that you mentioned, which is Omar, he's really like an X factor for me, because we've never had a center who can really shoot that well and defend all at the same time. It's either been one or the other, right? And playing Bam at the 5, it does work for a majority of the games, but we have seen instances where he can use a big body defender down there in the center position who's just going to take up space. Kind of like what you said about PJ Tucker. The guy's 6'9", but he plays like he's 7'2" and 320 pounds. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I said this is not a vertical team. They don't have a lot of high flyers. It's a horizontal team. they have a lot of guys who take up space. Kyle takes up space, as we know. PJ takes up space. Jimmy takes up space. I think that is kind of the direction. They're going to be a hard team to get through. I don't think they're going to go over teams. Bam is really their only elite athlete. And even Max Strus, he's kind of a wide body. Like he's strong.
And long arms
I think,
too, right?
And long arms. And look, Duncan and Tyler have both gotten a little stronger too. Particularly Tyler, obviously, we talked about kind of his leg work, but I think Duncan looks a little bit bigger to me too. I think they're going to be physical. They're going to be tough to get around. But I don't think it's not a Derek Jones Jr. team. I mean, this is a different kind of team. But I don't think it's necessary. I don't think they looked at Milwaukee and Brooklyn and said, we need to out athleticism. I think they looked at it with Milwaukee. That's a physical team. They defend you. Okay, Middleton, Holiday, Giannis. You have to be physically strong. I think the combination of being emotionally and physically kind of worn down last year and just not having the horses by the end of the season is why it looked like that.
Right.
I think they're much better equipped this season to compete with them.
We think so too, man. And I think that's the greatest way that we can wrap up this conversation. Ethan, thank you so much for joining us. Tell the people where they can find not only the 5 Reasons Sports Network, but all of the other various outlets that you guys have.
Yeah, just find us. I mean, the best way, 5reasonsports.com, no paywall content, but also the Twitter handle will get you everything. So go to @5reasonsports, that's the number 5, or the Instagram account. Twitter is where we primarily operate. And then the 5 Reasons YouTube channel, pre and post game off every Heat game. Once the season starts, they are doing a post game tonight too. I don't know why, but they are. And we'll have a podcast on 5 on the Floor. 5 on the Floor, 3 Yards Per Carry are our 2 primary podcasts. You can check that out as well.
Awesome. We'll make sure to retweet that and let everybody know where they can continue to find you guys. Ethan, like I said, thank you so much for the time, and we'll talk sooner than later, all right? Have a great time at the Heat game tonight.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.